trying to really get a handle on the UK legal system, I mean, really understand it, it can feel at times like you're trying to piece together this intricate puzzle.
Yeah.
It feels important, obviously, but it's a bit like, where do you even begin, without just getting totally lost in the weeds?
That's a really common feeling, I think, yeah.
Mm.
It's a system that's built upon centuries of decisions and constantly adapting laws, and so it naturally has a lot of layers to try and unpack.
Right, and that's exactly what we are going to try and do in this deep dive today. We've got some really good resources, a comprehensive overview of UK law, and then we've got some really interesting perspectives, actually, from students navigating the whole legal studies path. And I think our mission today is to try and just pull out the essential insights, the stuff that you really need to know without getting too bogged down in the jargon and the complexities.
Yeah.
So think of this as your sort of express route to understanding how this whole UK legal framework operates.
Exactly. And we're trying to, I think, give you the core, the foundations, and also then the key areas which really shape all of our lives. Recent developments that you should be aware of, the challenges that the system faces, and even how you can engage with it all, a bit more effectively. And then also we'll touch upon, what it's like to actually go through the process of pursuing a legal education in the UK.
Okay, so let's dive straight in then to those foundations. I mean, what are the core built-in blocks of the UK legal system?
So at its core, the UK legal system rests upon this dual foundation. So we have what's called common law. And you can think of that as sort of the accumulated wisdom, if you like, of centuries of judicial rulings. It's how similar cases have been decided in the past. And these precedents, they provide really a flexible and evolving foundation for how law is actually applied in practice.
It's a little bit like the system is learning from experience.
Precisely. And then alongside that, we have what we call statutory law. And these are the written laws that are passed directly by Parliament. So these statutes, if you like, it's Parliament's way of directly intervening and addressing specific needs of the current day. And they can create entirely new laws, or they can update existing laws. So it's really a dynamic duo shaping our legal landscape.
Right. So you've got Parliament on one hand making the rules, if you like, and then you've got the courts on the other hand who are sort of acting as the referees, interpreting and applying those rules fairly. So what's the dynamic like between these two players?
It's a really critical separation of powers. So Parliament, as we've touched upon, holds the legislative authority. They have the power to create, to modify laws. And that really reflects, the democratic process, the will of the people as expressed through their elected representatives. The judiciary, on the other hand, their responsibility is to make sure that those laws are applied consistently and justly. So they're the ones who interpret, the meaning of statutes. They draw upon common law principles when making their judgments. And this division of power is fundamental to upholding what we call the rule of law.
Right. Now, just to sort of clarify as well, because the UK isn't just a single uniform legal entity. I know, for instance, Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own sort of distinct aspects to their legal systems.
Yeah.
So can you just unpack that a little bit for us?
That's a very important distinction. So while Scotland and Northern Ireland do operate under the overarching UK legal system, they've also maintained their own separate legal systems in certain areas. So, for instance, laws concerning education or criminal justice, these can differ quite significantly from those in England and Wales.
Right.
So while the fundamental principles might share similarities, the practical application can vary quite a bit depending on which part of the UK you're actually dealing with.
Yeah, really important point. Okay, let's explore then some of the sort of main areas of UK law that I think have a direct impact on all of us, in our day-to-day lives. So I guess criminal law is probably what comes to mind for most people when they think about the legal system. So what's its main purpose?
So the primary aim of criminal law really is to maintain order. And it's there to protect the safety and rights of everyone in society. So it's ultimately about defining unacceptable conduct and then setting out the consequences for breaking those rules. It's about protecting society, but also at the same time making sure that individual liberties aren't unjustly curtailed.
It's about getting that balance right.
Precisely, yeah.
And there's obviously different levels of seriousness when it comes to criminal offenses as well.
Absolutely. So criminality is generally categorized based on its severity, and it can range from quite minor offenses such as shoplifting at one end of the spectrum, all the way up to very serious crimes like murder. And obviously the investigation and prosecution of these offenses, as well as potential penalties, will vary considerably depending on which category we're talking about.
Yeah, and where are these cases actually heard? I mean, what's the process?
So less serious criminal cases, these are typically heard in what are called magistrates' courts. These are the lower courts. And more serious offenses, they're dealt with in the Crown courts. And that's where cases are often heard in front of a judge and a jury.
Okay. And what kind of punishments can be handed down by the courts?
So penalties can range from fines, relatively small sums of money, to community service for less serious offenses, and then all the way through to substantial jail sentences, for more severe crimes. And the purpose of sentencing, it's often multifaceted. It's there to punish the offender, of course.
Right.
But it's also there to try and deter others, to prevent other people from carrying out similar actions. And also to try and rehabilitate the offender, if at all possible. And also, importantly, to protect the public.
Okay. Understood. So shifting gears a little bit now, because we also have, alongside criminal law, we also have something called civil law. So how does that differ from criminal law?
So civil law focuses on resolving disputes between individuals or organizations, or even between, an individual and the state. But where a criminal offense hasn't necessarily occurred, so it's not the state prosecuting someone for a crime. It's about enforcing rights and obligations and providing remedies for wrongs committed.
Can you give us some sort of everyday examples of what falls under civil law?
Sure. So contract law, for instance. This governs agreements and contracts between parties. That's a major area of civil law. We've also got family law, which deals with issues like divorce, child custody arrangements, inheritance. That's another really significant one. And then we have what's called tort law, and this covers civil wrongs that cause harm. So, for instance, claims for personal injury resulting from negligence. If someone slips on a wet store in a supermarket because there weren't any warning signs. Something like that.
Right. Okay, that clarifies things. What about our rights as employees? So, that obviously falls under a specific legal area as well.
Right. Absolutely. So employment law is a really vital area of law, and it aims to ensure that there's fair and equal treatment in the workplace. So it establishes the rights and responsibilities of both employers and employees.
Right. Okay. So what are some of those key rights then that employees have?
Well, key employee rights, these include the right to receive at least the national minimum wage. They have protection against discrimination based on factors like age, sex, disability, and also the right to a fair process, if they are to be dismissed from their job.
Okay. And on the flip side, then, what are some of the main obligations that employers have?
Well, employers, they have a duty to provide a safe working environment for their staff. To make sure that their employees have proper contracts of employment, which outline, their terms and conditions, and to comply with all relevant labor laws. So, for instance, regulations on working hours, holiday entitlements, things like that.
Right. So quite a balancing act there. Another area I think that's been very prominent, particularly in recent years, is immigration law. So what's the sort of fundamental function of immigration law in the UK?
So immigration law governs who has the right to enter, live, and work in the UK. And it's a very complex area. It's subject to, frequent adjustments in response to various factors.
So what are some of the different sort of categories then that allow people to come to the UK legally?
Sure. So there are various visa categories, depending on the reason for the visit or the stay. So you have work visas, for instance, for skilled professionals coming to work in the UK. Student visas for those pursuing education, family visas for relatives of UK residents or citizens. And then also business and tourist visas for shorter durations.
Right. And what's the distinction between having a visa and obtaining, permanent residency or even citizenship?
So a visa typically grants, temporary permission to stay in the UK for a specific purpose and time frame, whereas indefinite leave to remain, also known as permanent residency or ILR, this allows a person to live and work in the UK without any time restrictions, provided they continue to meet certain criteria.
Yeah.
And then citizenship grants full rights and responsibilities as a UK national. And also a crucial point to remember is that since Brexit, there have been significant changes to immigration rules, affecting both individuals from the EU and those from outside the EU.
Right. So yeah, a huge shift there.
It is, yeah.
Okay, let's move on then to the business world, because obviously UK law governs a lot of aspects in that sphere as well. So what are some of the key things that it covers there?
So business law really provides the legal framework for companies operating in the UK. And this covers everything from, the legal process of setting up a business, whether that's as a sole trader, a partnership, or a limited company. And then all the way through to the ongoing responsibilities and regulations that they must adhere to.
So, for example, like what kind of ongoing responsibilities are we talking about there?
Well, one major aspect is tax obligations.
Yeah.
So that includes things like value-added tax or VAT, corporate tax on company profits,
Yeah.
and then the pay-as-you-earn system, or PYE, for deducting income tax from employee wages. Business law also includes consumer protection laws, and these are designed to ensure that there are fair trading practices and ethical conduct when dealing with customers.
Right. So it's all about creating this kind of fair and transparent environment, really, for both businesses and consumers to operate within.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, let's think about how all of this actually impacts our daily lives, because I think it's probably more pervasive than we often realize.
Yeah, definitely.
Even something as seemingly straightforward as renting an apartment or buying a house, involves a whole range of legal considerations.
Absolutely. So property law governs, the legal aspects of those transactions. So everything from, tenancy agreements, property ownership rights, the legal process of transferring land. It's all governed by property law.
Yeah.
And then, even think about something as common as driving. The speed limit that we have, the requirement for insurance, and the penalties for traffic offenses. All of these things are established by law.
Yeah. And in today's world, this sort of digital world that we live in now, data protection is a huge concern.
Yeah.
So what's the key piece of legislation governing that whole area?
So the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which the UK has incorporated into its own legal framework. This sets out the rules for how personal data can be collected, stored, and used by organizations, and it grants individuals significant rights over their own personal information.
It really highlights how deeply these legal frameworks are interwoven into our everyday existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned earlier on about some recent legal developments. So what are some of the significant changes that we should be aware of?
Well, the Online Safety Bill is a notable piece of recent legislation, and this is aimed at regulating harmful content, on digital platforms, and trying to make online spaces safer for users.
Yeah.
And then, as we discussed earlier, the ongoing adjustments related to Brexit,
Right.
these continue to reshape various aspects of UK law, particularly, in areas like immigration, trade relationships, and business regulations. And then in employment law, there's been, ongoing discussions and evolving guidelines concerning flexible working arrangements, and potential future increases in the national minimum wage.
So it's a constantly shifting legal landscape.
It is, yeah.
Now that brings us to, I guess, some of the challenges that are inherent within the UK legal system. So what are some of the sort of common difficulties that individuals and businesses face?
There are quite a few factors, I think, that can contribute to law-related problems. Sometimes the laws themselves, can be ambiguous or open to different interpretations, which can lead to disagreements and disputes. And then legal proceedings in the UK, unfortunately, can be quite lengthy, often due to the sheer volume of cases and court backlogs, and also the potential high cost of legal services. That can be a significant barrier for many individuals who, are trying to seek justice. Complex immigration laws, as we've touched upon, can often lead to confusion and difficulties in navigating the system. Employment disputes, over issues like wages or unfair dismissal. These are not uncommon. And then in the realm of criminal law, the increasing sophistication of cybercrime and evolving perspectives on sentencing. These present ongoing challenges for law enforcement and the justice system.
Those are some considerable hurdles, I think. So what are some of the more practical steps then that individuals and businesses can take to navigate this complexity, more effectively?
Well, staying informed is absolutely crucial. Regularly checking official government websites for the latest updates, on legislation and any relevant guidance. That's a vital first step. And then for any complex legal matter, seeking advice from a qualified solicitor is always, the recommended course of action. Utilizing legal technology solutions, that can also help with, tasks like documenting and managing cases. So that can be quite useful. businesses need to make sure that they, maintain full compliance with any industry-specific regulations that apply to them. And everyone should, be aware of their fundamental consumer rights and understand data protection laws like GDPR that we talked about earlier. Considering mediation as well, as an alternative to court proceedings for resolving disputes, that can often save significant time and expense. Maintaining organised records, of any legal documents, that's always essential. Online legal advice platforms, these can also offer helpful initial consultations.
If you're not quite sure whether you need, full legal representation, that can be a useful first port of call. And businesses should prioritize, a clear understanding of their tax obligations and always adhere to high ethical guidelines in their operations. Joining, relevant professional legal organizations, this can also provide valuable, networking opportunities and insights into current developments. And then finally, more generally promoting greater legal awareness, within communities, within businesses, that can be really beneficial for everyone.
That's a really sort of comprehensive set of actionable tips there. Now, for those who want to sort of delve deeper, really stay current with legal developments, where can they find, reliable information and connect with experts in the field?
Well, professional networking platforms like LinkedIn, social media platforms like Twitter can be really useful, for following lawyers, legal commentators, experts across various legal specializations. And then dedicated professional legal forums online. These are also excellent resources for staying informed, about the latest developments and best practices.
And it's not just about hearing from the experts, is it? I mean, I think understanding different viewpoints, on legal issues is also really important for a well-rounded understanding.
Absolutely. So whether, the discussion revolves around, criminal justice reform or the intricacies of corporate law or fundamental human rights, actively engaging with diverse perspectives, through discussions, analyzing, relevant case studies, even attending, public meetings or webinars. These can really broaden your understanding and help you, form more informed opinions on legal matters.
Okay, let's get into some of the data and insights then from our sources, because I know there were some interesting statistics and even a significant case study highlighted. So what sort of stood out to you?
Well, several statistics, I think they really illustrate the dynamism of the legal landscape. The fact that something like 90% of UK companies experience the impact of new regulations annually, that really highlights just how frequently, the legal environment for businesses is evolving. The typical hourly cost for engaging a solicitor, ranging from around £200 to £500, that just, underscores the potential financial implications of seeking legal advice. The sheer volume of legal activity as well, over 4.5 million cases handled each year. That just demonstrates the scale of, of the legal system in the UK. And then, the 35% increase in cybercrime cases over the past 5 years, that points to a really significant and growing area of challenge, for the legal framework to address. Yeah, some really striking figures there. And what about that case study that you mentioned, the post office scandal, I think it was? Yeah, the post office scandal. I mean, that's a particularly significant and impactful case. It involved the wrongful prosecution of over 700 sub-postmasters. And this was based on flawed data from an unreliable IT system.
Yeah. And
this case really tragically exposed some critical weaknesses within the UK justice system, including, the potential for the misuse of technology in legal proceedings, a severe lack of transparency in the post office's handling of the situation, and really the paramount importance of robust judicial review.
Yeah.
To effectively scrutinize cases like this. And it serves as a really, stark reminder of the profound human cost when things, go wrong within the legal framework.
A really sort of sobering and important case to remember. Now, our sources also included some insightful quotes, I thought, from prominent legal figures. So what were some of the key messages that came through from those?
Well, Lord Bingham's assertion that the legal rule is at the pillar of an equitable society. In the UK, it is a guarantee that laws are equally applicable to everyone, even those in the state itself. I mean, that really powerfully emphasizes the fundamental principle of the rule of law. That every individual and entity, regardless of their status or position, is subject to and treated equally under the law.
Yeah, that's a really sort of fundamental principle. And what about Baroness Hale's perspective?
So Baroness Hale observed that the legal system in the UK is a blend of centuries-old common law principles and modern legislative reforms, ensuring it adapts to contemporary challenges while maintaining its historical integrity.
Yeah.
And I think this really highlights the essential balance, between respecting the well-established traditions of common law and the crucial need for the legal system to continuously, evolve and address new challenges in a modern context.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see those two perspectives side by side, emphasizing both those foundational principles and the need for this sort of ongoing adaptation. Now, for some of our listeners, they might be considering taking a more direct plunge and actually pursuing legal studies,
Yeah.
in the UK, and our sources touch on that aspect as well.
You do, yeah. So the Let's Study material, provided some really valuable insights into that process. Um, And it really highlighted that, deciding to pursue a law degree in the UK, it is a significant commitment. And it involves navigating the university application process, so going through UCAS,
Hmm.
managing visa procedures for international students, and making informed decisions about, course selection and specialization.
Right, and it sounds like they feature some specific examples of students who successfully navigated this path.
Yeah, they do, yeah. So for instance, Shanthakumar, he received guidance on, identifying leading law schools, you know, crafting a compelling personal statement, which ultimately helped him gain, admission to prestigious Russell Group University.
Hmm.
Rajat, he successfully overcame challenges related to, his student visa application and securing funding through scholarships and loans, thanks to the support that he received. And Yashas SK, who was aiming to specialize in international law, he received assistance, in identifying suitable academic programs, building professional connections through networking and finding relevant internship opportunities. So, these stories really underscore the value of having support and guidance when navigating, these complex processes.
It certainly sounds like having that expert guidance through those intricate administrative procedures can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, from fully understanding, admission requirements and application deadlines to correctly navigating, visa regulations and exploring available funding options. Having expert support can really significantly ease a student's journey into legal studies in the UK.
So to bring it all together, then it's clear, I think, that the UK legal system is a really dynamic and multifaceted entity. It's built upon this long history of precedent,
Yeah.
but it's constantly evolving to try and meet these modern challenges, and it touches on nearly every facet of our lives, from our fundamental personal rights to the way businesses conduct themselves.
Precisely, yeah. And while it might seem, a complex landscape to navigate, staying informed about these laws is essential, for effectively navigating that complexity and safeguarding your rights and interests. And for any specific legal concerns, seeking professional legal counsel is always the most prudent approach.
Absolutely. And I guess it really makes you think, considering the ever-increasing role of technology in our lives, as well as, I guess, powerfully illustrated by the post office scandal and
Right.
this ongoing rise of cybercrime. How might the UK legal system need to further adapt, to ensure that it maintains fairness and delivers justice in this rapidly evolving digital age? Or when we consider the distinct legal nuances, that exist across the different parts of the UK, what are the continuing implications for national unity and the protection of individual rights across the entire nation? I think some really sort of thought-provoking questions to consider.
Yeah, I mean, the UK legal system is a continuous work in progress.
Yeah.
And maintaining, curiosity and actively engaging with its ongoing evolution is something that I think we can all benefit from.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a truly illuminating deep dive into the UK legal system. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise
You're welcome.
and helping us unpack all of this. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us today in the deep dive. We trust this has given you a much clearer understanding of the UK legal landscape. Keep exploring and stay informed.